I downgraded. I used to have an apartment in New York, and now I'm back in Tucson, Arizona, because, well, New York isn't so good to be in right now. Look, that's a mountain behind me. It's so beautiful, this spot that I'm at. It has the desert right behind where I'm staying at, right? See the short bus? And then look behind me. That's just all desert back there, right? Look, we even have a little garden that we planted. Okay, enough of the tour. I've done a lot of tours. I want to talk about the Baha'i faith because, well, it makes me very happy. Actually, religions make me happy, and people have an animosity towards religions. Thank you, Moonlit Bunny. Yeah, so there's a lot of animosity towards religions because when you start to learn about history, well, you see a lot of the wars and atrocities that have happened in the world have been due to religion. So it's really easy for a negative image to be painted about religion. But the thing is, you need to keep in context with history, is that in history it's always the atrocities, it's always the big horrible things, the wars, the genocides that are the most blaring details of historical accounts, right? You don't read about the individual good that comes to each individual's life due to religion in history books. You know, there's not space to talk about how, you know, maybe some people that weren't as smart as you know, needed to go to church every Sunday to get them to be good people, to get them to be less selfish people, if that makes sense. Everybody thinks I'm the devil. No, I'm not the devil. People are just afraid of what they don't understand. And the whole concept of the devil in Christianity is basically, part of that is the Christian church, the priests wanting to hold on to their power and not wanting the congregations to stray into other practices, into pagan practices or practices of other religions. So everything that's not Christian gets labeled as the devil. There used to be, before the whole 12-tone equal temperament of music, classical music, was reformed, the church was going around calling music that didn't sound good or wasn't in the 12-tone equal temperament devil music, right? If you weren't playing these exact 12 tones that fit in with the Christian calendar, you were playing devil music, right? So it's just funny how everything that seems powerful that the Christian church doesn't understand gets labeled as devil stuff. So anyways, the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith came about in Persia in 1844. The predecessor of the Baha'i faith was the Bab, and he was kind of like John the Baptist. He was like the gate, announcing that the promised one of all ages is coming. And on that date that the Bab declared, he actually was found. He didn't go and announce it to the public. There was a seeker that came to the Bab's house and found him, right? And said, "You are the one that I've been seeking. You are the promised one. You fit all of these criteria in the prophecy, in the Quran. You don't smoke, you don't drink, you're a single man in this age range. You are the promised one." And then the Bab said, "Yes, you are correct. You have found me. You are one of 19 people to find me independently. 19 people will come to me and recognize that I am the promised one." So he didn't even go and announce himself in the street. He was found, he was discovered by 19 people independently. And he was the one to announce that Bahá'u'lláh was coming. Now on that first day when he first declared, this is the crazy thing, this was in Persia, and then across the world in 1844 on that day was the day the first telegraph was sent. The first transcontinental communication was sent on that very same day, and the communication read, "What hath God wrought?" Right? Very interesting. So the very first time that humans are able to communicate in a split second across continents is the same day that God was like, we better get the next coming of the prophet there and ready and in place and teaching and educating these humans about spirituality in this fast changing age. that same day was also the day that Bahá'u'llah's first son was born, Abdul-Baha, which he ended up becoming the caretaker of the faith. So on that day in 1844, it's very interesting and amazing that it coincided like that. And you know, Baha'is actually believe that Revelations, the prophecy of the end of the world, is actually prophesizing all of the changes that we are seeing today, for the reason that there is no way to go back to the old world. The old world has ended, right? The days of knights in shining armor, you know, pagans and witches and people believing in dragons and all this stuff is over, because now we have science and technology to explain everything, and people are not going to give up their science and technology, right? There's no way to go back to that old world. Therefore, the old world has ended, right? So that's a very interesting belief about the prophecy of Revelations. There was no way for Jesus to explain to those people 2,000 years ago what technology today would look like. There was no way for him to explain what the internet would be. Could you imagine Jesus trying to explain the internet to those people 2,000 years ago, right? First he'd have to explain what electricity is. Then he would have to explain what circuit boards and computers are. Then he would have to explain what computers all across the world connected through satellites would look like, right? It's like people still thought that the world was flat back then. I mean, it wasn't until 1492 that Europeans realized, hey, Columbus was right, the world is round. Sorry, flat earthers. We figured this one out. I mean, people, Giovanni Bruno was burned at the stake for trying to tell the king that the world was round. You know, he was challenging the king's knowledge that the world was flat, right? So they burned him at the stake. Like, people were burned at the stake to prove to us that the world was round, when the powers that be back in the day thought that the world was flat. Sorry, I get a little annoyed by the whole flat earther thing, because the way that conspiracy theories have been propagated and propagandized is pretty crazy. Anyways, back to the Baha'i faith. Some of the main principles. You know, it's the same lineage and belief that is in Islam and Judaism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, where there's progressive revelation. That basically mankind is like children in a spiritual school. And as the child becomes more developed and educated, and as we learn more about the world around us, the technology that we understand, there's a need for a next prophet to come, for a future educator to come and bring new teachings to the next grade of students, the next grade of humanity. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that although a new prophet has come, although there's a new promised one of all ages, which is Baha'u'lláh, it doesn't mean that the whole world needs to go to the next grade right away, right? Everybody is in their own personal spiritual space, right? There's many people alive today that Baha'i isn't right for. You know, there's many people alive today that really what's working for them spiritually is, you know, going to the mosque, you know, praying in the mosque 5 times a day, or going to Christian church once every week, you know. Maybe even though Baha'i has come in the 1800s, you know, there's still all these people that, you know, there's no way their minds and their spirituality is ready to, you know, accept the change of a new religion, you know. So that spiritual grade, you know, humanity passing into a new spiritual grade is a gradual process that happens over time, because, well, humanity is so diverse. And that's where the Baha'i faith comes to the principle of independent investigation of the truth, which is that because humanity is educated and literate today, it's our duty to read spiritual texts and writings for ourselves and determine for ourselves our own spiritual connection with God, to determine for ourselves what we believe in our hearts, right? That nobody can tell you you are wrong for what you believe in, right? Because your own spirituality is a personal connection with God in here, right? Nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can tell you what to believe. Like you, that's inside of you. You know, you could pretend, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jack Mormon, I'm, you know, to save face for your community. But really what is inside in your own personal connection, nobody can take that away, nobody can change that. And so because we are literate, it's our duty to read the texts and develop that for ourselves. So Baha'i has no priests or clergy above anybody. There's no priests and clergy above anybody telling people, oh, this is how you should interpret the sacred texts, the sacred writings. In Baha'i, they believe in the Bible, they believe in the Torah, they believe in the Quran, they believe in the Bhagavad Gita, right? But they also have their own newer books. One is called the Kitab-i-Aqdas. So no Baha'i can tell you you're wrong for how you interpret the book. There's no priests in Baha'i telling you this is how to believe. And it's not to say that Christianity is wrong. You just have to keep it in context of the state of humanity when Christianity came about. When Christianity came about, basically everybody was illiterate. And there was a specialized profession called being a scribe. You notice how there's no scribes anymore, right? Because everybody can read and write, or most people can. But back in the day, nobody could read and write, so they would have to hire a scribe to interpret official documents from the government, or to say, read the Bible. The priest was the one that could read the Bible and interpret it and do a sermon for those people way back then. So there was this need for the priests and the clergy. And of course, when the printing press was invented and more Bibles were printed and became affordable and people could read the Bible for themselves, the Catholic Church got scared that they were losing their power in people being able to read the Bible for themselves. People no longer would need the priests to do it, and they got really scared of losing their power that was held in the clergy, right? And this brings us to the other reason why there's an independent investigation of the truth, which is not only does humanity advance beyond what religions can deal with and handle. I mean, science points to, oh, well, evolution is a thing, whereas Christians, you know, look like they lack science, you know, scientific understanding because they reject evolution. But also the other reason behind the progressive revelation is that man corrupts religions. There's tremendous power that's created in religions and having a belief structure that humans follow. I mean, since the beginning of religions, you know, over several generations, man starts to corrupt the religions because that power that's created in a belief structure and an organization, humans thirst for that power and they will take that power and corrupt it. And also religions splinter through that corruption. The religions splinter and fracture into all these different sects that are fighting each other for power and for the followers, right? So that's another reason why God periodically sends new prophets down, is because the word of God needs to be renewed. The word of God needs to be reunified again. All those splintered, fractured sects need to be reunified, and the older religions that have been corrupted need to be decorrupted, basically. So progressive revelation, you know, it's your duty to educate yourself as far as religions. I mean, don't take my word for it, like reading Rainbow style. Go out and read about the Baha'i faith yourself, you know. And it was amazing being raised Baha'i. I was told that, you know, whereas Christianity, a lot of Christian churches, or Islam, or they're basically saying, oh, all the other churches are wrong except for our church. You're going to hell unless you're a Christian. You know, it was very nice to be raised Baha'i, where they basically said, you know, nobody is wrong. The only thing that's wrong is telling other people they're wrong for what they believe in. There's a multitude of different beautiful religions that you can study and learn about, and you determine for yourself what you believe in, you know. That basically everybody is right if it works for you. If a religion or belief system works for you, then that's what's right for you. So it was a really beautiful, like, context to be raised in, you know, to contextualize religion in general. It didn't leave a nasty taste in my mouth, you know, because when I went to my friend's Presbyterian youth group, and they said, oh, all the other religions are wrong except for Christianity, and if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, the Son of God, then you're going to hell. I was kind of like, well, what happens to all the people in some remote island in Polynesia that aren't exposed to Christianity? Are they automatically going to hell? The pastor didn't really have an answer for that. And it kind of made me sad. It was kind of disheartening. I didn't want to be a part of a church that said that everybody is wrong except for us. It just seems like the same power grab. I mean, I wouldn't say that gay, for Mr. Goatflakes, I wouldn't say that you're wrong if you're gay. I don't know about that. That's Christianity. Here, I gotta get some power. Oh my gosh, guys, we're gonna go on the short bus and then we will finish this little discussion. Look, I share this short bus with my fiance right there. Look, there she is. What? You look bad? You look bad. I just gotta get the power going. Oh, thank you guys for joining me. Okay, just getting gotta get our power hooked up. Okay, there we are. And I'll finish this little discussion talk about the Baha'is. Thank you guys for joining me. And if you guys have any questions about Baha'i when this is done, this is what we're talking about. It was a great upbringing because Baha'i recognizes and acknowledges all the other religions that came before it as like truth. As Baha'i, I was encouraged to read the Bible, read the Quran, read it all because there's truth in it all. Oh, I'm explaining what Baha'i is. Hey, thank you, random guy. It was nice because, I could learn about Zoroastrianism. I wasn't part of a church that was saying, hey, what's up, Andrew Rat? I wasn't part of a church that was saying all the other. Why am I having trouble connecting? I don't like it. Okay, back again. Okay, really quick. Okay, anyways, Baha'is believe in complete equality between men and women. They actually believe and recognize the maternal role of a mother. Still more of an educational role of the next generation. So if a family only has enough money to send one child to higher education and they have a girl and a boy, that they should actually prefer educating the girl child than the boy child, because the girl is naturally going to be more of an educator of the next generation. So it's more important to pass on the knowledge to the future educators than the future risk takers, right? Men are more of the risk takers, have more likelihood to die at a younger age and lose that knowledge, easier, if that makes sense. So complete equality between men and women. They also believe in science and evolution. That the only reason why the older religions didn't explain science to those people way back then was they had no foundations of science to base an understanding off of. It was like, could you imagine Jesus explaining evolution to those people way back then? They had no foundations. It's like, maybe they'd start, if you tell people, oh, you guys came from monkeys, maybe they'd start doing weird stuff with monkeys. So yeah, today is the 12th day of Rizwan. It's a Baha'i holy day. There's many amazing stories about Bahá'u'lláh and the Baha'i faith. Their major holy sites are in Haifa, Israel, along the, it goes all the way up mountains. One of the interesting things about Baha'is is Jews believe that, in the Torah it says that once the Messiah returns, that's when Jews are God's chosen people to inhabit Israel. Now, there's a sect of the Hasidic Jews believe the Torah word for word, and they have a very literal interpretation, and they actually protest Israel Israeli occupation of the Holy Land, because they believe, well, the Messiah hasn't returned yet. So the Jews are breaking the covenant. They're breaking the prophecy by being in Israel. They need to get out of Israel because, well, the prophecy hasn't been fulfilled with the promised one returning. Well, the Baha'i's interpretation of that, so they go out and protest Israel being there. The Baha'i interpretation of that is that, well, Bahá'u'lláh has returned. And Bahá'u'lláh is the promised one of all ages, right? So by their logic, the promised one has returned, so therefore the prophecy is being fulfilled because, well, at the time of Bahá'u'llah's death in the 1890s, that's when the modern Zionism movement really began, right? And so because the promised one has returned, now it is time for the Jews to return and inhabit Israel. And the interesting thing about it is that Muslims have a hard time accepting the Baha'i faith because Muslims believe, it says in the Quran that Muhammad is the last prophet and then the world will end. Well, as I said before, the Baha'i interpretation is the end of the world was the Industrial Revolution, the telecommunications revolution that came about in the past 2 centuries, right? So Muslims don't like Baha'is. They think Baha'is are heathens, right, that are going to steal their congregations. So Muslims, wherever Baha'i holy sites are in the Middle East, see, Baha'i came out of Persia, the precursor prophet was executed, and then the main prophet was persecuted all across Persia, Iraq, Constantinople, Adrianople, and Turkey, and then he finally made it over to Haifa, to Akka, the prison city of Akka, and then to Haifa. The thing is that in Persia, all of the Baha'i holy sites have been destroyed. In Baghdad, all of the Baha'i holy sites have been destroyed by the Muslims. However, the Jews don't have an animosity towards Baha'is, and they allow the Baha'is to exist and have their holy sites be in Haifa, Israel, and Akka, Israel, right? So it's my belief that Israel, the Jews returning to the Holy Land and controlling the Holy Land is part of the prophecy because it allows the Baha'is to exist and to have their holy sites exist in Haifa. Whereas if it was the Palestinians, I'm not sure if they would allow the Baha'is to exist there. Nothing against Muslims. Actually, Islam is a great, beautiful religion. You don't need to apologize because, Islam is part of the lineage. It is part of the progression of prophets. Muhammad was just the last prophet of the old world. He was the seal of the prophets of the old world. But guess what, guys? Today is a new age. Today is a beautiful world. And it's a different world. The old world has ended, guys. So, anyways, I'll take a couple questions, but I got to go before this live stream ends. I guess it makes them a liar for hiding all damn fossils. Jesus, man. I don't know. Some Christians say that God put the dinosaur bones under the earth to test our faith. I don't really believe in that. I'm reading your comments, your questions right now. Oh, wow. See, people get so upset about God and religion and beliefs. Just a spiritual tool. And whatever works for you, that's the religion for you. Just don't go trying to force your religion down other people's throats, that's all. Then it just makes people have an animosity towards religion and want to turn away from religion. And don't apologize for what you believe in, Wow, thank you, Mr. Goat Flakes. No, that's my bus. Okay, anyways, if there's not any further questions, that was Baha'i in a nutshell. It's a beautiful religion. They also believe that Baha'i will bring about world peace. Yes, that will get people to stop fighting about religion because it's a much more tolerant religion, tolerating other people's beliefs. Thank you, guys. My name is Special Head. Happy Rizwan. I hope you guys have a beautiful day.